Hello, my name is Trey Jones, and I am in the Offensive Security class this summer, and I am presenting to you a talk on the embedded system security research project that we did for this class, specifically on automotive hacking. I found this topic quite interesting, as I'd kind of wondered for years and years as to how secure vehicles really are that we drive every day, and I've heard stories about people being able to defeat uh, keyless entry systems. And so I decided to dig into that along with just the other portions of the attack surface to see what kinds of things could be used to exploit a vehicle. So now professionally, I actually work in embedded system security, but on airborne platforms, which is, has some similar concerns, but uh, automotive is something we can all easily relate to. So for most of the development of automobiles, cybersecurity really hasn't been a focal. It's just been a complete afterthought. And so as these manufacturers build automobiles, they focus on usability features and meeting safety requirements, which there is a whole bunch of rigor associated with safety, including the DO 178 safety certification that's available, which drives a certain set of objectives for how not only what is developed, but how it's developed. But the cyber really hasn't seen the same level of attention. And of course, um, vehicles are becoming more and more under attack as hackers, are becoming more experienced with the various kinds of tools and technologies that the automobiles are using, especially since these automobiles are becoming more and more connected with for content delivery as well as self-driving, autonomous capabilities. So it's just inviting more and more opportunities to be attacked. In fact, there was one study that recently said that here this year in 2025, uh, of all automotive cyber incidents that have occurred thus far, and right now we're in July, the 45% of them are due to or involving ransomware. So, I mean, that's a serious concern in terms of just safety of vehicles when you have potential ransomware that can target a car, and not only that, I mean, it's a significant financial investment for the owner, to suddenly have their car not be usable, and there potentially not be an easy way to recover it or one that's cost effective. So also, as I mentioned, the attack surface for the vehicle, and we're going to explore the attack surface in this talk, is continuing to grow, and it's already pretty significant as it is. So obviously, we need to understand what would be a motivation for a hacker wanting to uh, attack, commit a cyber attack against a vehicle. And I mean, some of these are pretty obvious, but just for the sake of discussion, we went ahead and enumerated a handful of them here. Number one is, any potential privacy violations or theft of data that's in the vehicle or in the, you know, infrastructure that the vehicle connects to that's associated with the vehicle, that would allow an attacker to gain, potentially damaging information or information that, the owner of the vehicle might want to maintain privacy over. Also, just because so many vehicles now are equipped with GPS, and location sharing is something that is, becoming more and more prevalent with some of these interconnected vehicles, as well as just the potential ability if an adversary gets into a vehicle, they could probably access the GPS location and exfiltrate it. So tracking where somebody is when they don't know you're doing that is a concern. Uh, a much bigger concern is the potential for, basically a denial of service type attack where the vehicle gets disabled or operations of the vehicle are disrupted in some form such that it presents a safety concern for the operator. And these could be, malicious, some way to commit a crime where you significantly harm or kill, cause loss of life of an individual maybe as part of a murder plot or something like that. I mean, you could just imagine all the conspiracy theories and the movies they can make about something like that. And then finally, of course, is just another enabler for either the theft of the vehicle or property contained within the vehicle, leading to some monetary gain for the attacker. So now we'll kind of take a look at the attack surface, and this may not necessarily be all inclusive, but this is the major ones that I felt like examining as part of this study. Number one is the physical access attacks, which require the hacker to be in proximity to the vehicle. And as we'll see, some of these attacks may require entrance into the vehicle, or in some cases may not, may be able to conduct them with just whatever access, that he could have, potentially underneath the car. Then there's remote access attacks, which some of these fall into sort of the traditional, remote cyber attacks for other types of systems, but because oftentimes it's either targeting the infrastructure or protocols or some of those other things. And then we'll talk about some supply chain attacks, as well as the one that I mentioned earlier that I found of particular interest that I wanted to kind of understand better is keyless entry attacks. All right, so physical access attacks. So in this particular case, like I said, the hacker actually has to be in proximity to the vehicle. And one attack vector that are vulnerable aspect of a vehicle that could be the injection point of these attacks is the CAN bus that's used so frequently now on pretty much all modern cars. And it's used to interconnect all the different components, what we call the logic bearing components, or anything on the vehicle that performs some computational function, usually using microcontrollers, FPGAs, processors, systems on a chip, things like that, and sends messages to other components. So they're all interconnected. So these CAN buses are not really secure by design. They have no security features in the message passing that they do. And so if you get onto that bus, you pretty much have the freedom to navigate around the vehicle systems and inject messages that could perform various functions, such as locking or unlocking the car, starting or stopping the car, arming or disarming the alarm systems, and even opening the trunk. Once you're there, you pretty much own the vehicle systems. There was a talk on DEF CON where a guy mentioned that he was able to, he wouldn't mention the manufacturer, but there's I think it was the adaptive cruise control radar that's in the front of the car, is on the CAN bus on this particular make and model. And he was able to, from outside the vehicle, access the CAN bus through that component. And he could pretty much steal a car within 90 seconds of approaching the vehicle using that. So, it's pretty disturbing, when you have that kind of access. And so, a properly informed adversary who understands the systems on a particular make and model of car, locked doors aren't going to stop them. So remote access attacks. So these are definitely an area that is going to continue to grow and grow as more and more systems on the vehicle become interconnected. Oftentimes you see these going through the infotainment systems, but sometimes other parts of the vehicle might have direct connectivity, whether it's over cellular or going through the Wi-Fi of a paired phone. However they do it, they facilitate data sharing, sharing maintenance information or providing remote management functions. My car has an app so that you can go in and you can see things like diagnostic information and maintenance reminders based on data that it has, as well as remote unlock and lock or remote start and stop of the vehicle. And so, depending on, oftentimes some of these are not necessarily from the car manufacturers directly, but through one of their subcontractors that develop those systems. And so, the protocols they use may be vulnerable to certain types of attacks because maybe they weren't designed very securely. They often communicate with either a server or cloud-based set of resources for the back end, and those potentially have vulnerabilities just like other traditional IT environments that could be exploited. Now, if an adversary is able to use one of these avenues to get into the vehicle, like to get into the infotainment system, for example, they could potentially pivot from there. So let's say the infotainment system might be on the CAN bus with all the other more critical components, and potentially that adversary could then inject messages that would allow them to control other parts of the vehicle. Once again, depending on the make, model of the vehicle, how things are laid out, if there are any security features in the architecture of that vehicle or not. And then we move to the next portion of the attack surface, which is supply chain attacks. And this one really has kind of two areas that I've highlighted here. Number one of them is distribution of updates, software delivery from the manufacturer to the vehicle. And these typically, you could be required to do these at the dealer, but in some cases, a lot more popular option is over-the-air updates, which means there's some kind of distribution server that's in the cloud or in a data center that is the car connects to check for updates and pull down updates and update its firmware. Depending on if the supplier is using any kind of secure delivery like digital signatures, those are that may help mitigate those, as we'll talk about some mitigations at the end. But in the case that they don't, hackers could get in and replace the legitimate updates with ones that have been tampered with that include malware that would infect the vehicle and then start executing rogue code on the vehicle. A little more upstream from that would be affecting the development environment in which the software for the vehicle itself is written. So this could be compromising a developer's credentials, or potentially, malware got installed on a developer workstation that would allow an adversary to have access to code repos or infiltrate the code base, injecting malware at that point. Either one of these really has the potential to affect multiple vehicles, not just one specific targeted vehicle. So now we move into keyless entry attacks. And so this was a really fascinating topic because it's not only just traditional cyber-related type attacks against IT-related stuff. This is involving radio frequency attacks, which involves having specialized hardware. And I say specialized, I mean it's not general Wi-Fi, wireless network adapters. This involves software-defined radio type devices that are designed to look at a broader spectrum of radio frequencies, allowing you to capture and potentially replay, or as we'll see, relay signals that you've received. And so these devices are not that expensive, relatively speaking. I mean, one of the videos I saw, if you wanted to get a receive-only RF device, I mean, it was as cheap as like $20, and you plugged it into a laptop and you could capture traffic with it. Now, if you wanted to transmit or receive, you might have to spend a couple of $100, and it goes up from there. I mean, there are some setups that might be in the thousands of dollars, but it enables so much capability when it comes to examining a variety of radio frequency signals. And so what we're going to look at is 4 different types of attacks that involve keyless entry. So we'll talk about replay attacks, relay attacks, and then a couple of flavors of jamming attacks. So this first type of attack was called replay attacks, and this is one of the ones that I just I kind of speculated about and assumed was a viable thing for a long time before I dug into this. And this is where an adversary is somewhere near the owner of the car and is using one of these RF-based devices to capture any signals transmitted from the owner's remote, their key fob, when they try to, for example, unlock the vehicle. And so when it sends that signal, the adversary captures that and then later can go replay that against that vehicle in order to gain unauthorized access to it. Now this would assume that the keyless entry solution on that particular vehicle didn't incorporate certain features like rolling codes. It just basically sent a predictable signal that could be sent over and over and over again, and it doesn't otherwise incorporate any replay protections. So another type of attacks are relay attacks. This involves having 2 individuals with what's sort of a radio frequency signal extending device. So you'll have somebody that has a transceiver that is near to where the remotes are. So let's say the owner is in a building somewhere and he has his remote with them. So the first hacker would be somewhere near that, and then the second hacker would be out there near where the cars are, and using his he's got a transceiver so that it facilitates basically extending the range of the signal of the remote such that the vehicles he's near thinks the remote is in close proximity to the vehicle. This is in the cases where the keyless entry system uses a passive capability, which is being just near the car allows the owner to unlock the car if they are near the car with possession of the key fob or the smart key that's used. So that's what these newer systems usually incorporate a passive type system. So if that way the hacker could unlock the car because the signal extender has made it seem like the key is near the vehicle. All right, so now we get into some jamming attacks. So jamming is one of these things where you use one of these devices to create a lot of RF noise that interferes with a receiver's ability to receive the legitimate signal. And so for this attack, the hacker would stand near the vehicle and basically produce a jamming signal towards the vehicle such that when the owner tries to use his key remote to transmit a command, such as, say, a lock command, then the car would not be able to receive it. And so, let's say that the owner is walking away from the car and, they've gotten somewhere, they've gotten out of the car, they're walking away, and they just hit the lock button once. If the hacker was jamming at that time, the owner might not realize their car didn't lock. And so, the owner continues to walk away, and then the car is still unlocked, unbeknownst to them, and then the hacker can get in the vehicle and, do whatever they're intending to do. Now, as a potential countermeasure, and this is something I typically do, is usually, you tap that lock button at least twice. The second time produces an audible noise from the car, giving you a confirmation that the vehicle's locked. And even, you can usually hear it from some distance away as you're walking away. And finally, we have the rolling jamming attack, where this involves a hacker is simultaneously intercepting and capturing signals coming from the remotes while also preventing the vehicle from receiving those signals by jamming jamming the signal towards the car. Then he can replay those captured commands later. This is often used as a technique to try to mitigate against the rolling code feature that some of the keyless entry systems use, which was intended to thwart the replay attacks that we talked about earlier. You know, the codes, the transmissions with each code are supposed to only allow to be used once, but if the car never actually receives a particular one with a particular code, then it is still fair game to be used. So let's talk about now how can we prevent some of these attacks from being successful. So, I mean, there's a variety of potential mitigations and countermeasures, but some of the big ticket ones based on some of the attacks we looked at is number one, it's important that these manufacturers actually look at software assurance and incorporate some form of secure software development practices into their normal product development lifecycle, such that they have a way to hopefully detect any vulnerabilities early and mitigate those by fixing the code itself, such that when they field the software, the potential of exploits against that software is reduced due to less vulnerabilities in the software. It's important to understand that, you know, getting to completely defect-free software with no vulnerabilities whatsoever is unobtainable because you never fully know, you know, if you've really exhaustively looked everywhere. Now, it is true that simpler code bases that have less functionality, it's easier to reach that level of assurance, but at best what you're doing is reducing the risk. And at least hopefully you've identified and fixed most of the vulnerabilities that are exposed to an adversary. The next thing is considering how you can incorporate digital signatures and some other techniques in order to ensure secure delivery of the software from the developer all the way through to the vehicle systems. And then it's important to deploy any of your back-end solutions, so whether they're on a server or in the cloud, you know, following best security practices, making sure things aren't misconfigured, you know, all the permissions and authorizations are appropriate, and that you don't have a variety of defects that could affect those environments, which would allow exposure of data or privilege escalation or, you know, potential functionality being leveraged by an adversary. And then finally, looking at any of the protocols that you're using for communications, either within the vehicle or between the vehicle and these back-end environments, ensuring that those incorporate security features that mitigate against you know, integrity violations and authenticity violations. All right, thank you very much. That was my presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed it.